everybody. This is Todd Hayen here with ManTalk, and we've got a little clip here. I'm gonna play for us from Danielle Haig, and we can then get into our discussion. And I can be reached at my website is down there underneath my name, toddhayentherapy.com, and or you can email me if you wish to, and my email address is here. So now give it a write down if you want to email me, and then William will give you his, and I'll throw his up there when he's talking. And so I hope you enjoy the talk today, and we're going to start in a minute.
Hey everyone, William MP out of Toronto, existential counselor, shamanic practitioner, medicine guide, polarities teacher. Looking forward to today's topic. There's my email down below. You can email me if you want to shout at me, disagree with me, or whatever else you want to say. I'm here for it.
So you're open to anything. Okay. So they can throw tomatoes at us, you know, virtually. Yeah. Throw the rotten tomato at the screen. Okay. We'll play this little clip here. Now I can't find it. Hold on a minute. That's weird. Okay. Play this little clip, and then we'll talk about it in a second. Here it is.
Your husband is not one of your children. If you want him to do the exact opposite of what you want, try this. Tell him what to do, how to do it, when to do it, what to say, what to eat, what to wear, how to drive, where to park, interrupt him, talk over him. You will never get out of him what you really want, and it will certainly kill his attraction to you. He's a grown man that thrives on your respect, affection, and appreciation. Stop dictating and start doting.
They used to call that reverse psychology. Remember when you were young? They would say,
I never was young.
On me.
What? Say that again.
They would say, "Don't you use reverse psychology on me?" But it was like a dirty trick that you could play to try and get someone to do your will by baiting them with the opposite or something.
Oh, right. When she says, "I'll tell you what to do to not have him," yeah, right.
Yeah, like if you want your husband to do the dishes, don't nag him to do the dishes.
Yeah, right, right.
You're gonna flip him into this because he feels mothered. He goes into adolescent counterdependence of like, "Fuck you, don't tell me what to do."
Right.
He's only resisting doing it because you told him, not because he doesn't want to do it.
Exactly. Well, that applies to a lot of things. I don't think that's just a male-female thing either.
I would say it's an adolescent thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. But there is something to say. And I think a lot of, of course, her whole focus is talking to women about their partners, about men, and giving them secrets about this and that. But, obviously a lot of the key things that she says applies to both, respect, affection, consideration, those are primary for male, female, male, female, female, male, whatever relationships. And also in any other kind of orientation or whatever, when you're partnered with somebody, respect and regard and whatever are very key elements. But what she does say that is, I think, focused a little bit more to the masculine is this idea of the nag, the person, the feminine that is always telling the masculine what to do and how to do it and whatever. That doesn't seem to be as common. It's the disrespect involved in there. There's a male to female version of that. Okay. I'm not saying that men are perfect, and obviously, and how they deal with their partners, but the female version of the nag, which is of course everywhere in our historical fairy tale background, that archetype or expression of it is very common throughout the world in different cultures as well. And this is, I think, what she's, from an archetypal perspective at least, is what she's really focusing on. Now there's a lot more to say, but I'm gonna turn it over to you, to go on with whatever you're seeing as a first impression with this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily about the well, it probably is in some way about the polarities, but like even just on the surface level, nagging, or as my Israeli partner likes to say, hucking. I didn't know that one until I met her.
Okay.
Hucking
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah.
I don't know where that comes from, but I like it. It's yeah. I mean, basically, it's like, you know, when people feel disempowered, they feel like they've lost control.
Right.
Their desperate need to regain it usually comes out in a form of overwhelming someone through overt aggressive manipulative tactics, usually in the form of repetition, needling. You know, it's a function of control madness. You know, as John Bradshaw would say, I think, and it goes back to a wound where we need to be in control, because when we were out of control, we got hurt.
Well, isn't that what essentially, if you reduce all behavior and psychology down to, it reduces down to controlling your environment to keep safe.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, now there are different tactics of control. There are different methods of control. We can say not the most common, but certainly one for males, for men, is power, is physical power, because men are generally more physically powerful than their female partners. So we see in domestic violence and in aggression and whatever, we see that as a tactic for control. But
yeah, and it's a form of emotional manipulation, right? I think.
Oh, of course, yeah,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What's implicit in the nagging is, I withhold positive regard and affection and respect for you until you've obeyed my commands.
Well, that's
right.
Yeah, that's the I guess the darker side of it. That, you know, but because that's control, that's a power play on either side. If you do what I want you to do, then I will not be as manipulative. I don't know if it always works out that way, because I think a lot of people do what the partner says they want them to do, and they still get manipulated. So it's an unconscious system that's running, that, you know, we call complexes, that are unconscious systems that were formulated mostly in childhood and adolescence, or in early life. So they're immature, and since they're unconscious, they never go away unless you keep them conscious and you can bring them up to the forward thing. Now, one thing she says, she starts out by saying, your husband or your partner or whatever is not your child. And, you know, the comment I would make about that is that, yes, he's not, but if he's acting like he is, if he's got his own stuff and he's a puer, an eternal boy, a child to his partner, then he's going to be treated like one. Now, he shouldn't be, but he shouldn't be acting like one either. So I think a lot of women listening to this would say that if he acted like a mature man, I wouldn't be telling him what to do all the time. You know, I wouldn't be treating him like a child if he acted like he was a mature man. So what do we do with that?
But you're in this like pendulation between polarities of like,
right.
Cart before the horse. I don't know if you're familiar with transactional analysis, a kind of like out of style old 1960s way of looking at human interactions. I think it comes out of Eric Burns' Games People Play?
I don't know.
Yeah, and he has this, PAC, two sides: parent, adult, and child. And there's
right.
connecting with each other. And I find it it's a really great little map to use. I use it with my clients a lot. And the dynamic here is that the woman in this scenario is in her parent, but I would say in the shadow parent. So she's in the tyrant, and she's talking to her spouse, her husband, whomever, partner, as a child, and he's in a naughty boy, child mode, right? And what he would say, if I'm getting that right, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that what needs to happen is that there needs to be an adult to adult interaction here. Is that the adult, and the parent who looks down, but the adult needs another adult to respond to, right?
Right.
So that kind of solves the problem that you're saying, is that like one person's in the parent, one person's in the child, and if we can both meet each other adult to adult, then we can actually be more effective.
Absolutely. That is a much more, what would the word be? In explaining the same thing that, say, Jung explains with child complexes.
Yeah.
He'll say that anytime we slip into complex, we're slipping into child. And any time that we have, like in this particular situation, we're talking about the parent
Mm.
okay, speaking relating to the man that's the child, is also really technically in child mode as well.
100%.
Yeah, you're talking about although, what I say to a lot of my clients that are dealing with this, especially with men and literal mothers, their partner is usually a mother. She has a bunch of little kids running around, and I can't tell you how many times, if I even hint, does it seem like you have 4 children instead of 3? She'll immediately light up and say, absolutely. And, I forgive her more than I forgive him if he is a puer, like a child, a boy, and sits around and does nothing, doesn't work, plays video games all day on the couch or whatever.
Mm.
And she then slips into her mother mode of treating him like another child.
Mm.
The mother archetype, to be constellated, especially when you actually do have children, is a very natural constellation.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to have a shadow to it as it's being constellated. The shadow is only that you're projecting that mother, or you're presenting that mother in a situation where you're not the mother of your partner. So that's an unconscious part of it.
Yeah.
And so, there's a little bit on her for that, but more of it goes on to him for projecting mother onto his partner, because he's projecting mother onto her and she's projecting child onto him.
I think I'm going to say something that's sort of exactly what you said, but only a little bit different, or maybe not.
Good.
It's like, no, you're right. She's okay. So here's how I want to put it. A woman who's nagging her partner it's the inner child masquerading as the tyrannical parent.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's why it's in shadow, because if it was driven by conscious, intention, right. Then it would be her mothering him in his full, in her fullness, which would look like her skillfully engaging with him and recognizing that, that manipulative tactics aren't going to work, but she can still mother him, right. In different, more conscious ways. Right. One of the things that, one of the things I think in dynamics that works is that you just do it consciously. It's like, oh, I can see that you're kind of like in this little boy place, and like, okay, I'm gonna feel like I need to be your mother right now. Can I be mommy for a minute, little boy, and kind of like tell you what? And then there's both, conscious agreement to sort of play that game. It's almost like that game wants to happen anyway. We might as well just sort of like put it out in the open. And sometimes when I'm coaching people on engaging with their partners that way, that'll help them, because at least we're not on the grip of the unconscious.
I think that's wonderful, because one of the ways to make the unconscious conscious is to pretend like it is.
Yeah.
Okay. If you start acting as if you're conscious, like to say, I'm going to be mother right now to you, little boy, it doesn't necessarily make the complex come into the conscious realm immediately, but it opens a door for it to.
Yeah.
So the next time that complex is constellated, if you had played that conscious game, you're going to be less likely to be influenced by the unconscious system. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
absolutely,
I think playing those roles, like being intellectually aware. Okay, it's not necessarily that you're conscious of the complex of playing the mother role, but you're intellectually aware of it. You intellectually say, I am going to be intellectually aware that I am playing mother right now to my husband. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're conscious of the archetypal complex that's going on, but it's the opening to it. It certainly will allow you to become conscious. Does that make sense?
It does.
That clarification of it.
Well, it's like baby talk in relationship, which is everyone does it.
That's right. Right.
It's almost like we're ashamed of it. But I think baby talk, when you actually look at it through a conscious lens, it's like, hey, look, this is us both agreeing that we're in little regressed states here. And that's how we're meeting each other. I mean, the only switch in that for me is just like, like my grandmother used to say, do it in awareness.
Right.
Hey, you're a little
Your grandmother said that?
Baby. Yeah.
Wow. Was she a Jungian analyst or something?
No, she was a nurse.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's like very cool. Because that's a great saying.
Benny Hinn.
I mean, that's
too.
Huh?
She was a supporter of Benny Hinn. Do you know the
oh yeah
evangelical preacher who I think
was
in Egypt? No,
I don't know. I thought not Korea or something like that. Is that?
I went there.
Yeah.
But there's a lot there too. I mean, I think the other thing that is really obvious is that there's something about female-bodied people who that the mothering constellation is so powerful.
Yeah, it
And
is.
it's like you, as much as you don't want to be mothering him, there's this pull.
Yeah.
Right. And especially if you've had children, I think.
It's very natural. I mean, it's supposed to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's very much like, men also can be naturally pulled in toward, adolescent, kind of silliness and kind of, there's a pull there. Like, the people would always joke about, men are easily persuaded by, whatever, meat and sports and blowjobs. And it's like, there's this primal kind of thing in the masculine that has this very strong pull. And it's funny how we want, like, all of it gets fucked up the minute that we start doing it unconsciously and then shaming it and trying to make it as if it's a bad thing. Like, oh, haha, isn't it funny that you're so motivated by food and sex and, and mock war? It's like, it's not really funny. And it's not actually anything to be ashamed of. It's just instinctual and natural. I mean, as long as you do it with awareness and as long as you're constantly in your a significant enough amount of maturity around it, it's value neutral. It's just what it is.
Yeah, right. Would you say that there is also a criteria or a criterion of appropriateness? Like to project the child from the mother with a constellated mother archetype, which you're saying is natural, shouldn't be ashamed of, toward your husband at any time, rather than an appropriate time, is an unconscious projection or an unconscious constellation or activation of an archetype, just like a man constellating the boy archetype when he's in the middle of a business meeting may not be appropriate and therefore works against him. But if he's aware of it and conscious of it, then it's useful. The archetype itself, just like you just said, it's not, what's the word you use? Value. What is it? Value neutral. I mean, it is, unless it's applied in a situation that causes a consequence that isn't wanted or expected. I mean, the expected, no, because you can have unexpected consequence and it still be fine. But certainly if you're trying to create a mature relationship, say between a man and a woman, that's on an equal adult level, if you're constantly projecting or spitting out mother to your partner, or the partner is constantly spitting out boy to his mother, it isn't going to benefit.
Maybe,
I mean,
I would say that the goal isn't to try and cultivate a mature relationship. I mean, mature
when it's appropriate, when it's appropriate.
But look,
so you're saying that's not a criterion.
No, if you have a dynamic in which someone has tacitly agreed to play mother, and then someone has tacitly agreed to play child, and that's a dynamic that just works. Everyone gets their needs met, and everyone feels like it's equal and balanced, and everything's working fine. I mean, who cares? I mean, maturity only because it brings in functionality, because it brings in a capacity to be in that relationship.
Okay, this is an area, and we don't need to get into it, but this is an area we may disagree. You wanted to get into that. Okay, I do believe there is a and I'm not going to say what it is because I don't know, right. But I don't follow what you just said. I don't follow the idea that if you have an immature relationship and if it works, it's fine. I don't really go with that. I mean, it can be fine in the sense of within the limitations of it is fine. Okay, if you have a man that is somehow unconscious about what being a man is, okay, and he sits around in his mother's basement for his whole life playing video games, and it's okay, and everybody's fine with it, and he's fine with it. I don't think that's okay, because first of all, I don't think he'll be fine with it. And I don't think an immature relationship between a man and a woman, say that she's the mother and he's the little boy and whatever, is going to be fine. I think that's an oxymoron. That's my opinion. I mean,
Yeah,
you
but
can disagree with that.
I
That's
hear
fine.
you say no. I mean, I get your point, and like you're right. You're onto something big there. But I just hear what you're saying is that like you're describing a dysfunctional relationship. I mean, because like, look, if you've got somebody who's like squandering their potential because they're in this dynamic, but even though it's conscious, like, but you're describing a situation in which it's not functional. Because like as you say, here's this guy who's like playing video games all day. Well, I mean, clearly he's squandering his divine essence. I mean, like here's what I mean though.
Okay.
In the magician quadrant of the psyche, we're driven by the capacity to manifest, but manifestation only happens under certain circumstances. And two of the main ones are containment and intention, right? And the containment is I can be immature within contained within boundaries, right? Too much of that, it spills out, becomes uncontained, and it spills into shadow, right? And you become under a possession state of the thing because it's uncontained, because you've lost control of it. Also, if it's intentional, like if I set my intention to do this because there's something that I'm consciously aware of that's working for me in that dynamic, which means like I'm consciously choosing to be in a regressed state consciously, because it works. And that's a very different thing than if you're completely lost to your puer, shadow. And I think that's just a very small distinction.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. Okay. Because if you run with what I said in a particular direction, then it's like the Uber race. It's like saying that we know what a perfect man is and what a perfect woman is, like the Nazi idea. Okay, if this is what a person should be.
Yeah.
And I do not ascribe to that at all. Okay. I believe that there are all sorts of types of people that we could say are diminished in certain areas, the artist that lays around all the time and writes music or whatever. Okay. And I'm not even sure of this. I mean, this would be a good thing to argue about, because I'm not sure of this. I'm not sure if consciousness is the key. I think I do. I think I practice in my clinical practice, believing that is the goal, is consciousness and awareness. Okay, I believe that, but I'm not quite certain if that is all correct. I think that you can be an unconscious person and actually have a meaningful creative life. I'm not quite sure how I would work that out.
I think you're right, but I think it's because it's consciousness as a means toward an end, and the end is the skillful engagement.
Okay.
So if you're engaging skillfully, but you're unconscious of it, it doesn't matter. You're like you've minimized collateral damage. You're teleologically focused, and things are functioning and working well. You don't need to be aware of it. The consciousness that we raise within a transformational and healing space is in service of skillful interaction without collateral damage, right? I can maximize the needs that are coming from my highest self and minimize the damage. Minimize and not make zero, because there's no such thing. Like you said, we're talking about perfections. It's funny, like you say that and I'm like, I don't even know enough about like Nazism. Do they actually believe that there's such thing as like a kind of perfect man and perfect woman?
Oh yeah, I believe so. And again, I don't know enough to really speak intelligently about that, but there is the idea of the Superman, the perfect.
Well, Uberman.
There's another word for this, and I can't.
That's Nietzsche, and I think that didn't the.
Well, yeah, but okay. No, I mean, definitely Hitler certainly believed in the perfect race, the Aryan race, as being perfect, and physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. There was a perfection to that, and anything that came into it that was not of it, like other races and whatever, was of course frowned upon and effort to destroy it. So I think that I mean, it's a eugenic concept, obviously. And I think psychology has a tendency to move in that direction. It's like, if you read, obviously you do, but if anybody reads a lot about the beginnings of psychoanalysis and whatever, there is a standard they're moving toward. There is a belief that this behavior is pathological and this behavior is not. So they are definitely honing it down into a kind of a relatively narrow space. It's not really narrow. It's not like, National Socialism narrow, but it's still more narrow than, huh?
It's still confined. I mean, it's
still
driven by
confined.
unconscious implications of like, like James Hillman talks about the myth of trauma, and don't go mention that in public because it drives people crazy. It's not about denying that people are have experiences that we would call traumatic. It's just that it's the defining myth of psychotherapy. Like if we didn't believe in the myth of trauma, that events from the past that have been left unfinished, that overwhelmed you, are now influencing you in the present moment. If that was to be done away with, there would be no such thing as psychoanalysis, psychology, and psychotherapy, right?
Right.
But the point is, it's an underlying myth. I mean, just like the myth of the first mover in the scientific purview of the universe, right? Like you got to have some big bang in the beginning. Where'd that come from? Well.
Yeah, right. Give me one miracle and we'll explain the rest. Yeah, what I've been thinking about, I'll just throw this in here because this is something that's always perplexed me. It's like if we take the natural world with humans not in it, and we take the world of animals, and are they going to live a better life if they're conscious? And whatever that consciousness is, conscious of their unconscious. And it's like, it seems that any trauma really that's created outside of the natural world for animals, like let's just say dogs, for example, because they're a common pet, any trauma that they've experienced that they can't deal with as adult dogs usually is inflicted by humans. So they were beaten by humans, they were this or that. Now, if they were in the wild, the trauma they would experience of maybe saying a wolf coming along and eating the puppies, or getting in some kind of fight, where they get their throat ripped out or whatever, or partially ripped out. Would that be a trauma that then would affect them as an adult dog later? Would they become somehow dysfunctional? Okay. So if we look at it in the sense that only humans really have issue with trauma that is not processed, where traumas of animals are processed in the natural world, not trauma that's inflicted on them by other humans.
Exactly. I mean, because it's the gift and the curse of the ego, right?
Right.
It's the infinite puzzle that you're given as a birthday present by the divine.
Yeah. Right.
It's that cosmic game of, are you going to figure it out? I hope this doesn't sound sort of dismissive or cruel, but like, the gift of human embodiment that we've received karmically is predicated on this mystery of trying to figure out that you're divine. And part of the puzzle, part of the mystery, part of the plot in the escape room is that you fall under the conscious belief that you are traumatized and that you're acting out of your trauma. Right. And from a karmic perspective, it's about, can you break that spell and realize that there was never any trauma and never ever any you to even experience it and awaken in it. So in that story of the human experience, trauma actually becomes the kind of, I don't know, it's like the dice you roll on this board game, to see what move you have to kind of deal with. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, sure it does. Let me bring this back a little bit.
Oh yeah, we were talking about man children, and suddenly we're talking about medicine.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's good. That's okay. But we do want to have some kind of theme here. Going back to there was one thing that Danielle said that I was curious to know what you think about. That at the very end, she says something. I didn't write it down. She said, "Stop whatever it was, I guess nagging or whatever, and start doting."
Oh yeah.
I thought that was an interesting thing for her to say, because doting is very, very often referred to the mother. Okay, the doting mother. And it's interesting that she would use that term when she was talking about the negative mother, okay, with the nagging, but then use the what she's, I guess, considering the positive mother as doting. So how does that work in a relationship? Huh?
She's unconsciously slipping into her mother consciousness.
Well, if it's unconscious, I mean,
yeah, you're right. I didn't catch that, but you make a good point, because I think the definition of doting is when you kind of give an extra amount of care and support to someone.
Okay.
Like, so like rather than like, it's like a carrot versus stick, rather than giving them demands. If you don't do this, I won't do that. It's if you do this, I'll, you know, give you that or whatever. But I mean, I think that's just, it's just a watered down version of what we would say in the temple arts, which are kind of neo-tantric at the core of worship. And they kind of, you know, my view of that, it may be actually in the system itself, is that like there is a kind of hierarchy of like tolerance, respect, worship. So tolerance is the lowest, man. It's just kind of like, oh, I'll put up with your shit, you know.
Yeah, right.
You know,
right.
like, you do you, and I'll let it happen, but I don't like it.
Right.
Respect is okay. No, I can see where you're coming from, and I respect it, and you know, I think there's value in that, and it feels very sort of even. And then there's worship. The worship, I think, is the one thing that's missing here. I think in a lot of polarities, a lot of relational dynamics, the thing that's missing is worship. Literally, to worship your partner as if you were worshiping the divine masculine or feminine.
You're making a fantastic point here. And this is something that I believe in the work I do with couples, is that, and I think in modern terms, they won't call it worship, they'll call it cherish. Okay, which is very similar. The worship sounds, but I agree with you. I'm not arguing with your use of that term, because I really think that's what it is. In reality, it is worship.
Yeah.
And it's putting that divine masculine, divine feminine in the context it should be in. And if that is not present somewhere, it's not it shouldn't be 100% of the time, but somewhere in a relationship, you will not have respect. You will not have regard. You will not have accommodation. You won't have any of those things. And, you know, yes, you're right about tolerance, but there's also a tolerance that isn't just, fuck, I'll just put up with this. There's also a sense of flexibility within the idea of tolerance. Like my partner can do almost anything, and I'm still going to worship them and love them. And I don't think a relationship can survive without that. I mean, it can putz along, okay, like a lot of them do, but for it to really be a healthy, you know, combination of two people, I think that's brilliant. You just said that. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So worship in relationship comes in a lot of forms. I mean, if you want, you know, purely minded as I am, let's go right for the good stuff. You know, there's a constant kind of framing of sexual exchanges that are about like giving and receiving. But if you elevate that, it becomes worshiping and being worshipped.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is a function of what we call the sacred sexual, allowing yourself to see the sacred dimensions within the act of sex. And part of that is flipping into that that worshiping consciousness. That's about a kind of ecstatic humbling of self in the presence and awe of the other, and then the other one being able to, the other partner being able to relax and open and receive the worship. So it makes for really great sex. But then there's other smaller ways that you can do it. And I mean, other forms of worship are, you know, like when, you know, you're in a group of people and you're talking about your partner, and, you know, you hear what they say and you sort of say, hey, you know, I love what you said. This is, and you kind of like build up what they're saying and really promote them. Or, you know, even just like a great act of worship is, you know, when someone asks me about like, you know, hey, how's your relationship going with your partner? And I'll say it's amazing. And then I'll worship her in that moment and praise her. And, you know, talk about all the ways in which I'm in awe of her and deeply in love with her. And then what I'll do, and this is what my partner and I both do this, is like, we come home and delight in it. And I'll be like, listen to how I worshiped you today. I mean, we don't use that term, but I'll say that we both kind of get into our little kid place. Ooh, it feels nice to be praised.
Right.
But it's fun and it's exciting. And it's like, and there's also a lot of reciprocity too. I mean, the more that I hear that she's been sort of, you know, worshiping me to her friends and like lighting me up in all these glowing terms, it makes me feel like, yeah, I want to do that too. I want to give that gift to you. I want you to feel the way that I'm feeling. And there's a deep, almost erotic kind of engagement in that.
When it's working right. One of the things I see often is this refusal to move yourself into a more, I mean, it's almost a metaphysical state to be in, a refusal to move away from the pragmatism of the relationship, like, oh, my partner, I really see a lot of positive things in him, but there's a bunch of negative stuff too. Okay, that's a pragmatic truth. I mean, generally that's a truth about anybody. When you're in the worship mode, you don't see that. It's because you're looking at the divine. You're looking at the sacred of your partner. You're not looking at, oh, well, yesterday he got pissed off and he yelled at somebody and I just don't like that. You're not looking at that. Even though that could happen, that's not what you're looking at when you're in the worship mode. Exactly. And that's the sexual moment as well, because that's when the worshiping mode, I think, comes into the physical more readily, more obviously, because you're physically engaged.
Sure. Because of the presence of eros in the body.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think a lot of it, like you're right. It's about seeing through the partner and seeing through to the divine within. Which is also why in the sacred sexual, often we can begin and close an encounter with the same namaste prayer hands, the God in me bowing to the God in you, right?
Right. Right.
And also before penetration too, there's a conscious verbal or held internally kind of humble request to enter the temple. As I enter your body, I enter the temple and I ask permission, and permission is granted based on, how effective your worship has been. And that's like the form of foreplay. Like, have you actually done the hard work of holding space so that your partner can open? Right. Now, I'm speaking obviously from a masculine perspective, because opening is what we see in the feminine masculine, but also there's an opening in the masculine, body in the same way. So it's about flipping into that consciousness. And you'll notice too, I think a lot of people kind of get it. For people out there that have ever had a sexual encounter, that your psyche wants to go into a trance state.
Yeah, right.
You can see people in eros, and it's like they're hypnotized. It's trying to pull you in. I think part of the problem is not simply the debasement of sexuality that we see in modern times, but because of the overarching kind of spell of secularism, people find it really, really hard to be humbled and to be worshipped, because a secular mindset, by the way, I don't believe in atheists, but the secular mindset.
Just throw that in.
I wanted to get a laugh at you. But the secular mindset, because it blocks you, it condenses the experience into, but weirdly, it's narcissistic, because it's like, I can inflate myself to the peak, but I can't allow anything to be beyond that, so that I wind up becoming the pinnacle. And so then if you're stuck in that Cartesian, Newtonian nightmare, it's really, really hard for you to be in that place. So, okay, what are some of the workarounds? Well, we can use linguistic twists and say, well, let's say cherish instead of worship.
Yeah, right.
And to a certain extent, look, I don't want to poo-poo that, because everyone carries a kind of religious and spiritual trauma to a certain extent. And I'm more than happy to meet people where they're at and use those words. But ultimately, that when there's a blockage, when the divine is no longer externalized, but somehow internalized in you, I think that's what really gets in the way, and it gets in the way of deeper relationship. And that's a lot of scientific-minded people who are in healthy relationships will tell me to go fuck myself.
But that's also to a large degree a product of the culture. Yeah. This whole idea that, and it goes back to what I said earlier about the pragmatism of relationships. It's like people don't want to go outside the boundaries of rational thought. Rational in the sense of like, well, there's some bad things about my partner and it's a good thing. So I just want to make sure I'm always aware of that this isn't a time to worship. And it's not a physical thing. It doesn't have anything to do with behavior or even a physical being. It does obviously when you're sexually engaged, but anyhow, let me ask you this, unless you have more to say about that. Just again, going back to this idea again, let's do a little exercise or talking about a particular thing. Okay, when she talks about the wife and her position and her language, that is nagging, let's say the husband, telling him what to do, how to park, how to drive, and all of that. let's assume, just for argument's sake, that you have a relationship where it's relatively conscious. I mean, it's people kind of have a hold on their unconscious systems, and they're more conscious than, the man is not a puer. He's not lazy. He's not this. Why would a woman without that go into, as a reason, go into this nag mode, this feeling of having to control the masculine, the man in her life, when he's not doing anything that would give her reason to do that?
So yeah, I mean, I think one of the benefits of integrating the masculine and feminine, the contrasexual, is to be able to shapeshift and deeply empathize and be in that awareness within ourselves. And when I'm mapping out these polarities, one of the things that comes through for me is that the masculine within us, within all people, however you're bodied, has it craves independence, and the feminine craves dependence. And you can see that, everyone can see that in themselves, no matter how you're identified, no matter what body you're born into, no matter what your sexual orientation. There's a part of you that craves independence and a part of you that craves dependence. Anyone who's familiar with attachment theory will see that in there.
Yeah, right.
When you're not consciously constellating masculine consciousness enough, you're stuck in this dependency mindset of like, hey, I can't depend on you. You're not being dependable, and I need you to be dependable. And then in the masculine consciousness, it's, hey, why are you trying to interfere with my craving for independence? I'm just trying to do my own thing. Let me be. And so when you integrate the masculine and the feminine, it's like, oh, I can see your craving for dependence, and you can see my craving for independence. And we can come together and create that alchemical marriage where we can negotiate getting both.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. What would you in therapy do with a couple that is dealing with this lack of integrating the masculine feminine within their own systems? How would you?
We're a nagging mother.
You would what?
You're asking, like, if a client were a nagging mother, how could you address that in a counseling session?
Well, in this particular example, I'm saying the nagging mother, where the husband doesn't give psychological reason for that. If he, and this is a hypothetical, I mean, you probably never would have that like that, but a man who seems to be integrated, seems to be conscious, and the woman is not, and is doing this, telling him how to drive, telling him how to whatever. What would be the approach to work through that? Well, would it be individual therapy for her, or would it be couples therapy?
I mean, I don't know. I don't do couples therapy, so I don't know.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
To advocate, probably. No, if I was working with a woman, though, I mean, I would start. I mean, the very first level of this is just simply your carrying capacity. It's like, look, if you are overwhelmed and into this place of needing to be passive aggressive and naggy, and you can't connect with masculine consciousness, and if things are breaking down, it's because there's not enough capacity within you. And so, and you're being overwhelmed in those moments, right? Because everybody knows when you're well rested and well fed and hydrated, and you're not overwhelmed, and you're freshly fucked, you're on top of things.
Yeah.
And you can engage in those kind of moments with a lot of skill and a lot of grace. And so I would say start right there with being able to bring your baseline up a little bit so that you have more capacity for skillful engagement. And so what does that look like? Classic stuff that we all do in therapy: boundaries, self-care, mindfulness,
right.
meditation practices, that kind of thing, how to advocate for yourself, whatever. Getting your yeses and nos in place is a function of boundary, right? Once you have plugged up those energetic leaks, you reclaim energy for yourself, and then once you've reclaimed that energy, you can use it to skillfully engage. The second thing I would say is this is a moment for you to be made consciously aware of what we mean when we say masculine and feminine. And this is where a kind of psychoeducation is really important, because we all have these sort of assumptions about what we mean. And usually negative ones. I mean, still, you'll get people that are hung up on, like, well, what do you mean that women have to be some way and men have to be another way? Right. And then it's this sort of limiting thing. It couldn't be farther from the truth. It's utterly liberating, because there's a realization of your capacity for both, and to dance between the two. completely independent of, as I keep saying, how you're oriented and what your body was and what you were assigned at birth, right? But in order to do that, we have to make it conscious, and we have to say what it is. And so mapping the psyche into the masculine and feminine begins with, do you know what it looks like? Do you know that, for example, receptivity is in the feminine and moving outward and penetrating is in the masculine?
And it's not necessarily.
Like, what do you mean that women can't penetrate? No, I'm saying they can when you're in your masculine.
Right.
And again, to go back to your point from before, I mean, when you start to play within these realms, suddenly what it means to be a man or a woman kind of, it almost like loses itself in the bound infinity of how much you can do when you're consciously constellating. So for example, you can be male-bodied, male-identified, and be super high in the feminine, be incredibly receptive and tender and open and giving and nurturing. And does it mean that you're any less of a man? Of course not. And anyone who would say so would be completely lost in some weird human construct binary that, you know, the gender studies people actually get right. Those things are constructs that we need to transcend, right? We do need to get away from like, what does it mean to be a man? I mean, what I would rather say is, what does it mean to carry in any moment masculine and feminine energies? Right, and how we use them skillfully.
Well, that's Jung's whole focus is integration of the masculine and feminine in the proper manner. You know, I would say if somebody is having issues that someone else would identify as you're not really being a man, it's primarily because there's some kind of unconscious blockage that is not allowing the system to operate the way the system is designed to operate. Which essentially will be a natural movement toward what we call a man, which doesn't necessarily mean more masculine traits. It just is an integration. It's a proper integration, individuation, whatever it is. And that can create just like art. There's so many different ways to take just a standard set of colors and create something that is absolutely phenomenally different from something else. And again, the key to me is always consciousness, and whatever that means. I mean, it's very hard to define that, but it's not a pathology. And in this type of psychology that I think we both practice, it's like, it's not pathology focused. It's not saying, oh, there's something wrong here with you in the way you behave. There's something unconscious that allows you to behave a particular way that yields consequences for you that are not beneficial to you.
Sure.
You may think they're beneficial, but they're not.
What usually. Yeah. And I think you're describing what the next layer of the work in a counseling session would be, which is, how is this historical for you?
Yeah. Right.
And so it's like, oh, okay. Right. Like the first thing I recognize is that I'm overwhelmed in those moments and I'm not consciously engaged. Okay. So I'm no longer overwhelmed. Now I'm consciously engaged. Oh, I see that I'm too much in the masculine. Okay. How is that historical for you? Oh, I wasn't given permission to be in the feminine because it wasn't modeled by my mother. So I constantly had, so the wheels are greased in that direction for me. Okay. So then, you know, you start focusing on, okay, when we can go back and finish that business and clear that up and make that conscious, now, rather than getting pulled into that, you have an opportunity to pull or to be blocked in that way. You clear those channels so that you can constellate the feminine and masculine more clearly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this qualifies as what I like to say is the top-down, bottom-up approach. It's like, you know, when we look at modalities in psychotherapy, it's so funny how people love to choose one and go with it. And I was trained eclectically, which really means you literally come at it from all angles. And I think true healing and transformation only ever happens when you're able to really come at it from multiple angles, including the like bottom up. How is this historical? Top down. What can I do in the moment here and now to willfully modify my behavior and make different choices so I'm not flipping myself over again? Right.
Yeah, that's like CBT versus psychodynamic.
Nothing wrong with CBT in that, like, sure, we all suffer from cognitive distortions, and we should clarify those cognitive distortions. But you're going to keep going back to them if you don't get into the where it's coming from.
Right. That's what I'm always telling everybody.
Why we need conservatism and liberalism. We need trade-offs and we need solutions. But if you only want trade-offs and then you ignore solutions, you're a bird flying on one wing. And if you're constantly looking for trade-offs and ignoring solutions, same problem. This is why in these polarized times, you get this impression that the left wishes that the right didn't exist, and the right wishes that the left didn't exist. And God forbid that they should get their wish, because we would be totally fucked.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of what it's looking like right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, again, going back to this idea here, you know, I just presented it. I think the way Danielle in her little clip presents it, that it's the woman's problem, that if you're nagging your husband and telling him everything to do, that you're not going to get what you want. Okay. And in most situations, it's going to be a little bit of both. It's going to be, you know, you may have the husband who is really, you know, into the boy archetype and is doing all the things that's going to get her to project the boy onto him and blah, blah, blah. So I'm not really quite sure where I'm going with that.
Well, I'll say on that point, 100%. I mean, look, it may be helpful for a woman that's getting pulled into that to recognize that, look, it's not your fault. You're being pulled into, like when he's in his little boy space, he's pulling you into mother. So you can let go of feeling as though this is your fault. But I think what she's speaking to is she knows that her audience are women who are receptive to guidance. And she's saying, you can't control, you have no control whether or not your partner is going to regress and go into little boy mode and pull you into mothering, but you can be aware of the perils of doing that without being conscious of it. And how
very, very well put. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, talk about top down, you know, it's like if you can change your behavior, by stopping the pull into, you know, the treating him like the boy and trying to control the situation as a mother would, then you very well may make the situation more conscious for him as well. If he is part of that. I don't know if he never would be part of that. Although I do think that if you are a mother, okay, and you're actually practicing being a mother and you're constellating that archetype day to day for most of the day, and your husband comes in and he's tired and he, you know, flops down on the couch or something, there is a possibility that you won't be able to shift that quickly out of mother. And I think the kind of thing that Danielle is saying is that think about that, be aware of that. You know, you don't want to project the child onto your partner unless he really is one, and then you still don't, but you have other things to work out.
Yeah, totally. So. I'm smiling because, like, you know, that's the conversation that I had with my partner last night. Her being in mothering mode and me coming home exhausted and kind of collapsing, and her being like, "Hey, I need you to not collapse right now." And we had a little negotiation around that. Yeah, no, and I think if you have the privilege of couples counseling, the obvious question to be asking with this couple is, you know, okay, so we unpack this thing. What did you need from him in that moment?
Right.
What did you need from her? Well, I needed him to be in his adult, and I needed her to be in her adult. You were in your parent, and I was in my child, and we needed to go adult to adult to make this work.
Right.
And what do we need to do to get there? Well, we were both overwhelmed. We're both stressed. We got to reduce our stress. We got to find ways to manage it so that we're not unconsciously getting pulled into this stuff. And I think that would be a way to approach it from a couple's perspective.
Yeah, and if you're looking at it without the complex or without the archetype or whatever jumping into it and making its way with your behavior, yeah, you know, you can then see clearly, well, you're tired and I'm tired too, so I'm flopping on the couch and you're running around trying to get dinner ready, you know, for the kids or whatever it might be, that you can look at that as a rational adult and like say, well, you know, I don't have the luxury here just to flop down on the couch, or maybe I do, and you're going to compensate for me in this moment, and the next time we'll reevaluate it as two adults and I'll compensate for the moment, you know, because flopping down on the couch when you come home is not necessarily a boy constellation. You know, you're just tired. and you know, if you you know, wanted to go and play video games down in the basement, that may be more of a boy constellation, but that also can be a way to relax. And like, you know, like we've been saying the whole time, any of these archetypes, when they're constellated, does not necessarily mean a bad thing. I mean, the man needs the boy in order to be spontaneous, to be, you know, not as risk averse as, I mean, all those things. I mean, a lot of the things that women love in their male partners is the boy.
Mm.
You know, he's the one that wants to party. He's the one that wants to have fun. And he's the one with a sense of humor and laughs. So it's a fine line if you're conscious.
Well, totally.
You're,
I think a huge thing that people kind of benefit from being aware of is the overlap between infantile consciousness and victim consciousness, because both of them are predicated on I can't. Both of them are predicated on I need dispensation from obligation in order to survive. If you put needs on me right now, I'm going to collapse. A victim believes that, and an infantile consciousness, you believe that about yourself. So, you know, it's like I'm dependent on you. If you don't meet my needs, I'm fucked because I can't meet them myself. And a victim is I'm dependent on rescuer. If you don't rescue me, I can't rescue myself. And I think you're right to compartmentalize those and see them as the distinct things. But often they overlap in a way that when we feel victimized, we regress. So if I feel victimized by my day, there's a part of me that says, okay, well, if I show up as victim, that'll be sort of repulsive and I'll be challenged on whether or not I'm a true victim. But if I revert back into boyhood, at least I can rely on charm and I can manipulate your maternal instincts to have mercy on me. Right?
Yeah. Very well put.
Into complaining and woe is me. It's a bit of a turnoff, and you might not be able to manipulate your way into the safety that your body is presenting to you as non-negotiable. Because that's what I was thinking about the situation last night that you reminded me of, was like where, you know, I had this part of me that goes, you need to push through this collapse right now and just do what you need to do in order to show up as a good husband, because I can see that my collapse is overwhelming my partner. And, you know, the message I get back is, I got nothing. I can't, there's no overriding this. I can't, there's no way. And so I'm just going to have to be in collapse and clean up the damage later, which is ultimately.
Right. So tell me what you think about the appropriate, to lack of a better word for it, the appropriate mother to boy, nurturing mother to needy boy in a healthy relationship. Where does that come? How often does it come? And how intense is within reason?
Whatever works.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a radical pragmatist, so it's like, you know, I can imagine that there are partnerships in which there's very little space for, you know, baby talk and regression and going into parent-child dynamics where everyone's just an adult all the time and it's fine. I can also imagine a healthy, functional relationship in which there is this dance between, you know, who's playing mommy and daddy and who's playing the child, and we just do it. We do it consciously. We move between it. We keep it contained. We keep it conscious, right? And so, again, I mean, it feels like what you were saying before about like what it means to be a man or a woman. It's a bound infinitive. Play within the boundaries and enjoy.
Right. It seems from my experience with couples, I see a lot of men that want the mother nurturing, but within a certain definition of it. And a lot of times their wives find that to be needy, and they don't find it comforting at all. They don't want to give that part up. They want the husband to always be the rock and always be the one in place. And if he deviates from that at all, even in really serious situations, like say the death of a parent or something, that they don't want to hold their husband. They don't want to contain him and his emotion because they find it as a weakness. And yeah, if that's every day, you know, for the major proportion of time, then of course that can be a problem. Yeah. But even I find it not a lot of times, but I find it several times where the women don't want that at all, in any way at all, coming from their partner.
Makes total sense. I mean,
yeah.
It's you know, it immediately strikes me that it's like, look, I need to know that I can always rely on you as daddy, and you need to know that I can always rely on you as mommy.
I think that's important to say.
But so I
think that's very important to say. Huh?
So you got two inner child parts that are scrambling, that are looking externally for parenting, when what needs to happen is that they need to be reparented internally. And this is where I think like, you know, internal family systems is very important, and transactional analysis and John Bradshaw, inner child theory, because essentially what needs to happen is human beings are, because we're tribal and community oriented, we absolutely need to be loved and cared for by other people. Otherwise, we'll just wither up and die.
Yeah,
Right. Watch that show Alone, right? A human being in harsh conditions at the very most will last 120 days and it'll be fucking miserable. That's the nature of what it means to be a human being.
Yeah.
But you can't rely solely on other people. Otherwise, you're a codependent, people-pleasing, helpless sort of leech. So what needs to happen is that you need to be able to love yourself sufficiently enough in order to love and be loved. And you need to parent yourself sufficiently enough that you can parent and be parented. So if I'm constantly looking to my partner to mother me, it directly correlates to my incapacity to mother myself.
Yeah.
And the work for me is to not stop asking for her to mother me, because that desperate little boy in me doesn't want to hear anything of the sort, because he needs mothering like his fucking hair's on fire. The switch is I need to learn how to mother him. And the great thing about relationship is that you have a perfect model right in front of you all the time in relationship for her to model you how to mother. How do I be the little boy inside of me who's losing his shit? Well, she just showed you. She just gave it to you. So do that. Act, like you said before, act as if, jump inside of her skin, take that teaching and apply it to the little one in you who's crying out for it.
Yeah. No, very well put. Yeah. So let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. And obviously, if you have any questions or if you have any comments, criticisms, or whatever, please leave them in the comments. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do so, because it gives us an idea of the popularity and what people are looking for here. So any ideas you have, any topics you want to talk about, just leave them in the comments and we'll do our best to address some stuff. And so from me, I'll say bye-bye. And William?
Take care, everyone.
Okay. See ya.